The Arizona sun blazed down on the Desert Sun Police Academy, a sprawling compound nestled 10 miles outside Tucson, where the June 2025 heat hit a punishing 110 degrees. Dust swirled across the cracked pavement, stirred by the boots of young recruits pouring off a rattling bus, their voices loud with bravado, their eyes sharp with ambition. The air shimmered with heat waves, distorting the distant 2,000-foot silhouette of the Catalina Mountains. This was no place for the faint-hearted, a training ground of 100-yard obstacle courses, firing ranges, and relentless drills designed to forge warriors from raw will. Yet, amid the clamor of new arrivals, one man stood apart, his presence as unassuming as the faded gray t-shirt clinging to his sunburned shoulders. Keanu Reeves, known to the world as a Hollywood icon, stepped onto the gravel as John K., his identity concealed by a Department of Justice agreement as tightly guarded as a state secret. At 5'11" and 170 pounds, with gray-flecked hair tied loosely back and scuffed running shoes, he looked like a man who'd wandered into the wrong story. A tired stranger, not a star. But Keanu was no stranger to purpose, and his mission here was anything but ordinary. Keanu's arrival went unnoticed by the recruits, who were too busy sizing each other up, already carving out pecking orders under the relentless sun. They saw an older man, mid-50s, with no swagger, no badge of bravado, just a 40-pound duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a distant gaze that seemed to measure the weight of the world. To them, he was a nobody, a misfit who didn't belong among the lean, eager 20-somethings dreaming of badges and glory. "Move it, Grandpa," sneered Cadet Ryan Holt, a broad-shouldered ex-football player from Phoenix, brushing past Keanu with a smirk that drew chuckles from the group. Keanu didn't flinch, his eyes tracing the towering barracks and the obstacle field stretching into the haze. He wasn't here to play their game. He was here to uncover a truth most of them couldn't yet see. A truth rooted in a promise made years ago, one that burned deeper than the Arizona heat. Keanu's mission wasn't just about preparing for a film role, though that was the official story whispered in the halls of the DOJ. This was personal. 3 years earlier, his cousin Michael had been caught in a police altercation in Los Angeles. A routine stop turned violent, leaving Michael with a broken arm and a fractured trust in the system. Late-night hospital conversations had haunted Keanu since, Michael's voice low but fierce. "Find out what makes them like that, Keanu. Find out before you wear their badge on screen." That promise had led him here, to the Desert Sun Academy, where he'd secured permission to train undercover for 6 weeks, unscripted and unrecognized, to walk in the shoes of those who wore the uniform. He wasn't chasing fame or headlines. He was chasing understanding, about the line between power and cruelty, about the culture that shaped those who swore to protect. But what he found in those first moments at Desert Sun hinted at something darker, something that would test his resolve and change the course of the academy. The recruits' banter filled the air, their voices carrying the easy confidence of youth. Over by the check-in desk, Cadet Sofia Alvarez, a single mother from Tucson with a quiet strength, swapped predictions about the Arizona Cardinals' chances against the 49ers in the upcoming NFL season, a nod to the state's football fever that grounded their camaraderie in American tradition. Nearby, Cadet Jamal Carter, a former juvenile offender from Mesa with a guarded stare, kept to himself, his silence a shield against the world. Officer Vargas, a grizzled instructor with a chest full of medals and eyes hardened by 20 years on the force, watched the new arrivals with a scowl, his arms crossed like a fortress. To Vargas, Keanu was an anomaly, a question mark in a sea of certainties. "Name?" Vargas barked, barely glancing at the clipboard. "John K.," Keanu replied, his voice soft but steady. Vargas grunted, waving him toward Barracks C. "Orientation's at 500, don't be late." Inside the barracks, The recruit's whispers turned sharp. "Guy's gotta be pushing 60, Ryan muttered, tossing his gear onto a bunk. "What's he doing here? Charity case?" Sophia shot him a look but said nothing, her focus on the faded photo of her kids tucked in her pocket. Jamal, unpacking nearby, caught Keanu's eye for a moment, sensing something unspoken in his calm. Keanu offered no explanation, no handshake, just silence, as if he could see through the bravado to the cracks beneath. But the hostility was already brewing. By evening, as the recruits gathered in the mess hall, the taunts began. "Lost your way from yoga class, old man," Ryan called, loud enough for half the room to hear. A spilled cup of iced tea, deliberate, not accidental, splashed near Keanu's boots, drawing snickers. Keanu ate alone, his gaze steady, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying Michael's words, weighing the cost of silence against the power of truth. This wasn't a movie set, not today. The Desert Sun Academy was a crucible, and Keanu was here to feel its heat, to understand what forged the badge and what broke it. But the hostility he faced, the casual cruelty masked as tough love, hinted at a deeper rot. Officer Vargas's voice echoed across the compound, barking orders for 5 a.m. drills, his tone laced with something more than discipline, a need to dominate. Keanu's silence in the face of mockery wasn't weakness. It was strategy, a choice to observe, to listen, to wait. He knew the truth would surface, and when it did, it would demand a reckoning. In a nation grappling with police reform, where 2024 had seen Tucson streets filled with protests over a local shooting, where DOJ reports cited 12,000 annual misconduct complaints, Keanu's mission was a spark in a powder keg. His presence, unnoticed yet pivotal, set the stage for a confrontation that would ripple beyond the academy's gates, challenging not just the recruits, but a community hungry for change. The tone of Desert Sun was gritty, the air thick with sweat and tension. Yet, there was a thread of hope woven into the dust. Keanu's journey was about more than exposing flaws. It was about igniting accountability, about showing that justice could rise from the ashes of cruelty. For every taunt, every shove, he saw a chance to understand, and to change, the culture that shaped those who wore the badge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the 100-acre compound, Keanu stood at the edge of the barracks, the weight of his cousin's pain and his own resolve anchoring him. This was no act. This was a beginning, one that would test the heart of American values, justice, redemption, and the courage to speak when silence was easier. Keanu Reeves stepped off the bus into the searing 110-degree heat of Desert Sun Police Academy, 10 miles outside Tucson, Arizona. The sprawling 100-acre facility loomed before him. Dusty firing ranges, 100-yard obstacle courses, and barracks baking under the June 2025 sun. At 5'11" and 170 pounds, Keanu, disguised as John K., blended into the chaos with a scruffy beard, graying hair tied back, and a worn gray t-shirt clinging to his frame. His 40-pound duffel bag hung heavy on one shoulder, but his steps were deliberate, his eyes scanning the recruits with a quiet intensity. To the others, he was an oddity, a man in his mid-50s with no business among the young, brash hopefuls vying for badges. The recruits, sweat already beading on their brows, jostled and joked, forming alliances under the watchful eye of Officer Vargas, a grizzled instructor with a chest full of medals and a scowl etched deep from 20 years on the force. Vargas believed harsh training forged real cops, and John K. was a puzzle he didn't like. "Name," he barked, clipboard in hand. "John K.," Keanu replied softly. Vargas grunted, waving him to Barracks C. Cadet Ryan Holt, a brash ex-football player from Phoenix, shoved past, smirking. "Move it, Grandpa. This ain't a retirement home." Laughter rippled through the group, but Keanu stayed silent, his gaze fixed on the obstacle fields. Remembering his cousin Michael's plea, see what they're really like. Inside the barracks, Cadet Sofia Alvarez, a Tucson single mother training to secure a future for her two kids, eyed Keanu skeptically, her hands clutching a photo of her children. Cadet Jamal Carter, a former juvenile offender from Mesa seeking redemption, unpacked nearby, his guarded stare softening briefly as he met Keanu's calm eyes. Ryan, tossing his gear, kept up the taunts. "What's with the old guy? Charity case?" Vargas singled Keanu out for extra drills, a grueling 2-mile run in the blistering heat, testing his resolve. Keanu ran, sweat soaking his shirt, each step fueled by a flashback to Michael's hospital bed, his cousin's voice raw. "They didn't have to break my arm." That evening, at a Tucson diner, recruits unwound over iced tea, swapping stories of 4th of July barbecues, Sophia's kids watching fireworks, Jamal's first legal celebration. Keanu sat quietly, absorbing their words, his silence a shield and a strategy. Ryan's jabs continued, but Sophia and Jamal began to sense something deeper in Keanu's stillness. Vargas's harsh commands echoed in Keanu's mind, hinting at a culture where power trumped principle. This wasn't just training, it was a test of character, and Keanu was ready to uncover its truths. The Desert Sun Police Academy's relentless 105-degree North heat bore down on Keanu Reeves, disguised as John K., as he trudged through a 5-mile run, a 50-pound pack digging into his shoulders. Officer Vargas, his face hardened by years of unchallenged authority, had singled him out again, his tough love veering into cruelty. "Move! John K. criminals don't wait for old men," Vargas barked, his voice cutting through the Tucson dust. Keanu's legs burned, sweat stung his eyes, but he pressed on, aware of the risk of heat stroke in the June 2025 sun. Overhearing Cadet Sofia Alvarez whisper to another recruit about a cadet who collapsed last year, hospitalized, then silenced by the academy. Keanu's resolve deepened. This wasn't just personal, it was systemic, echoing the 12,000 annual police misconduct complaints reported by the DOJ in 2024, a statistic that grounded his mission in America's urgent call for reform. Keanu faced a moral dilemma: report Vargas now and risk exposing his identity, or stay silent to gather more evidence. Unlike his passive observation in the early days, he chose action, using a hidden camera, plausible for an actor with resources, to secretly record Vargas's drills. Each click of the device felt like a step toward justice, a contrast to the silence he'd once kept for his cousin Michael's sake. During firearms training, Cadet Ryan Holt's mockery escalated, accidentally bumping Keanu's 9mm pistol with a smirk. "Careful, Grandpa, don't shoot your foot." Keanu steadied his aim, his calm masking the weight of his purpose. In quieter moments, bonds formed. Sophia, her voice trembling, confided in Keanu at the barracks. "I can't fail my kids. If I wash out, they're back to scraping by." Her trust in him grew, a flicker of hope in the academy's harshness. Jamal Carter, the ex-offender from Mesa, opened up during a late-night talk, his voice low. "I joined to prove I'm more than a rap sheet. But Vargas makes me feel like I'll never be enough." Keanu's steady gaze offered reassurance, a silent promise of change. Meanwhile, Ryan's taunts persisted, his bravado a mirror of Vargas's unchecked power. The recruits found relief in a pickup basketball game, dust rising from the court as they traded American slang, "Chill out, man," or "Bust a move." Their laughter a brief escape from the academy's tension. Yet Vargas's shadow loomed, his methods a symptom of a broader culture where power went unquestioned. Keanu's recordings captured more than drills. They held the truth of a system that broke spirits under the guise of building strength. As the days passed, his mission sharpened to expose the rot and spark a reckoning, not just for himself, but for those like Sophia and Jamal, who deserved a badge that stood for justice. In the desert sun, Police Academy's assembly hall, under a U.S. flag and a Tucson PD banner, the air buzzed with tension as recruits gathered for a mandatory lecture in June 2025. The 100-net of heat lingered, but the real fire was about to ignite. Keanu Reeves, still known as John K., stood behind a curtain, his hidden camera footage ready, a record of Officer Vargas's abuse, including a recruit collapsing during a 5-mile run in 105-degree heat. As Captain Elena Ruiz, the Academy's director, stepped to the microphone, she announced a guest who'd been among them unnoticed. Murmurs rippled through the 100 recruits. Keanu emerged, his graying hair neat, his voice calm but unyielding. "My name is Keanu Reeves," he said, pausing as gasps filled the hall. "I came to learn what a badge means. I found cruelty instead of courage." Keanu played the footage, Vargas barking as a cadet stumbled, dehydrated, under a 50-pound pack. The room froze. Cadet Ryan Holt, once brash, stared at the floor, shame etching his face. Cadet Sofia Alvarez and Cadet Jamal Carter nodded in quiet support. Their trust in Keanu solidified. He spoke firmly. "If this is how you treat your own, what happens to a kid on the street?" His words echoed America's 2024 debates on police trust, with 12,000 annual misconduct complaints, underscoring the stakes. Captain Ruiz, her face grim, declared Vargas suspended pending a federal investigation and announced reforms, anonymous reporting, and a new de-escalation curriculum. The hall, adorned with symbols of American pride, now bore witness to accountability. After the assembly, Ryan approached Keanu privately, his voice low. "I followed Vargas to fit in," he admitted, eyes downcast. "I was wrong." Keanu nodded, offering no judgment, only a chance for redemption. Sophia, emboldened, volunteered to lead a peer support group, her fear of failing her kids transformed into resolve. Jamal, once guarded, opened up to younger recruits about his past, breaking his silence to inspire change. These shifts marked a turning point, unlike the original story's simpler confrontation. Keanu's speech, grounded in real-world issues, cut deeper, resonating with Tucson's recent protests and a nation hungry for reform. The Academy felt different now. The 100-yard obstacle courses and firing ranges continued, but the air carried a new weight, reflection, not fear. Keanu's evidence, stronger than the original single incident, exposed a systemic rot, forcing recruits to confront their complicity. The U.S. flag in the hall stood not just for pride, but for a promise to do better. As Vargas's suspension sent ripples through the 10-mile radius of the Academy, Keanu's words lingered. A badge wasn't power. It was responsibility. The recruits, from Sophia's quiet strength to Jamal's newfound voice, began to embody that truth, setting the stage for a broader reckoning beyond the desert's edge. 2 weeks after Keanu Reeves's revelation at Desert Sun Police Academy, a quiet invitation came from Ms. Linda Hayes, director of a Tucson community center 5 miles from the city's core. In June 2025, with Tucson still reeling from 2024's police reform protests, her center served families scarred by police violence. Keanu arrived at the modest brick building, its walls adorned with hand-drawn posters, the air thick with the scent of lemonade and apple pie, quintessential American comforts evoking 4th of July gatherings. The room buzzed with residents' parents with wary eyes, teens with guarded stares, and Marcus, a 16-year-old dreaming of becoming a cop despite his community's mistrust. Keanu, no longer John K., sat on the stage's edge, his 170-pound frame relaxed, ready to share his truth. At the town hall, Keanu spoke of the Academy's 100-yard obstacle courses and Officer Vargas's cruelty, his voice steady but heavy with the memory of a cadet collapsing in a 105-degree heat. "I came to understand the badge," he said, but found a system that sometimes forgets the people it serves. His words resonated with Tucson's recent debates, where 12,000 annual police misconduct complaints, per 2024 DOJ reports, fueled distrust. Marcus raised his hand, his voice trembling. "Can people like me ever trust the police?" The room held its breath. Keanu knelt, meeting Marcus's eyes. "You start by being the change," he said, offering his hand. "And I'll help." He pledged $50,000 to fund a youth police dialogue program, a proactive step beyond the original story's single speech, sparking hope for grassroots reform. Residents shared stories of local pain, a mother's son profiled, a father's fear of sirens, tying Keanu's experience to their own. Ms. Hayes, her voice warm, noted, "You stayed when you could have left." The crowd clapped, not for a star, but for a man who listened. Weeks later, a mural rose in downtown Tucson, spanning 20 feet, depicting Keanu's silhouette alongside recruits, captioned, "Valor and Truth." It became a local symbol, reflecting America's love for visible legacies, far surpassing the original's brief community moment. The mural, set against the 2,000-foot Catalina Mountains, stood as a beacon of accountability, its colors vivid under the desert sun. Keanu's pledge galvanized the center. Marcus joined the dialogue program, bridging cops and kids, his dream of wearing a badge now rooted in reform. The town hall's apple pie and lemonade lingered in memory, tying the gathering to American community traditions. Keanu's commitment, funding change, listening to pain, shifted the narrative from exposure to action. As dusk fell, he stood with Ms. Hayes, watching families spill onto the sidewalk, their voices softer, hopeful. This wasn't just a moment. It was a movement, one that promised to heal Tucson's wounds and redefine what a badge could mean. As the final week of June 2025 dawned at Desert Sun Police Academy, 10 miles outside Tucson, Arizona, the 110-degree heat still pressed down on the 100-acre compound. But a subtle shift had settled into the dust. Keanu Reeves, no longer John K., moved through the 5 a.m. drills with the same quiet resolve that had carried him through 6 weeks of scrutiny and abuse. The 100-yard obstacle courses and firing ranges hummed with activity, but the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. Recruits like Cadet Sofia Alvarez and Cadet Jamal Carter now held doors open for one another, their gestures small but deliberate, a far cry from the sneers that once greeted Keanu. Officer Vargas's shadow, once a looming specter, had faded with his suspension, replaced by a new de-escalation curriculum that Captain Elena Ruiz had rolled out, inspired by Keanu's revelations. As Keanu packed his 40-pound duffel bag, no ceremony marked his departure. Only a nod from Sophia, her eyes warm with gratitude, and Jamal, his guarded stare softened, acknowledged his exit. Keanu slipped through the gates under the rising sun, leaving behind a camp transformed, not by fanfare but by reflection. Months later, on a Hollywood set bathed in the glow of 500-watt lights, Keanu stood in a police uniform, the weight of his desert sun experience etched into his performance. During a break, he unfolded a letter from Sophia, her handwriting steady. "I graduated last week. My kids were there, cheering. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." Another note came from Ms. Linda Hayes, detailing Marcus's youth police dialogue program, now thriving in Tucson with 50 teens enrolled, bridging divides in a city still healing from 2024's protests. Keanu's pledge of $50,000 had grown into a scholarship fund, ensuring recruits from underserved communities, those like Jamal, who'd once felt invisible, could join Desert Sun. This legacy, far beyond the original story's bulletin board quote, embodied American optimism, a belief that one person's stand could spark systemic change. Keanu's thoughts drifted to his cousin Michael, whose injury had set him on this path. The promise he'd made in that hospital room, to understand the badge's truth, had become a movement, tying his personal mission to a broader call for justice. The lessons of Desert Sun were profound, resonating with America's hunger for reform. First, Keanu learned that silence in the face of cruelty is complicity, a truth he saw when recruits laughed at Vargas's abuse. His choice to record evidence, risking his cover, taught that courage means acting despite fear. Second, change begins with listening. Sophia's fears for her kids, Jamal's redemption story, even Ryan Holt's apology showed that empathy could shift hearts. Third, a badge is not power, but responsibility. As Keanu told Marcus, you start by being the change. These lessons, rooted in Tucson's 2024 debates and the 12,000 annual police misconduct complaints per DOJ 2024 reports, underscored that reform requires accountability, not just authority. Finally, Keanu realized that lasting change is collective. Marcus's program, Sophia's peer support, and the scholarship proved that one voice could inspire many. In Tucson, a 20-foot mural now glowed under a desert sunset, its colors vivid against the 2,000-foot Catalina Mountains. Keanu's silhouette stood alongside recruits, captioned "Valor and Truth," a symbol of hope that outshone the original's fleeting quote. At Desert Sun, a new bulletin board quote read, "A badge doesn't make you strong. It's what you do with it. K.R." Recruits, from Ryan's humbled resolve to Jamal's mentorship of younger cadets, carried this forward, their drills now laced with purpose. The Academy's 100-yard courses felt less like tests of endurance and more like steps toward integrity. Keanu's legacy wasn't in the spotlight, but in the quiet shifts doors held open, stories shared, a community daring to trust again. To you, our audience, thank you for joining this journey through Shadows of Valor. Your support fuels stories that challenge, inspire, and heal. Keanu's stand reminds us all to speak up, to listen, and to act, whether in a 100-acre academy or a 5-mile radius of our own communities. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage and change. Share your thoughts below. Would you speak up or stay silent? Your voice matters, just as Keanu's did in Tucson's desert heat. Together, we can keep pushing for justice, one story at a time. This wasn't just an ending for Keanu. It was a beginning. As he walked off the set, the weight of Michael's pain and Marcus's hope lingered. He glanced at a photo of the Tucson mural, its colors a promise etched against the 2,000-foot peaks. Desert Sun had changed, not because of one man's fame, but because he dared to feel the weight of the badge and demand it means something more. The lessons, courage over silence, empathy over power, collective action over individual glory, were now part of Tucson's soil, carried by recruits who'd learned to serve, not dominate. Keanu's scholarship ensured that kids from neighborhoods like Marcus's could wear that badge with pride, proving that valor isn't in the uniform, but in the choices behind it. As the sun set over Hollywood, 2,000 miles from Tucson, Keanu knew the real script wasn't on the set. It was in the lives he'd touched, the truths he'd uncovered, and the hope he'd left behind.